A king was drowning, steel dragging him under. 20 knights already dead beside him, and on the riverbank. Richard the Lionheart was laughing. This was not the Crusade. This was France. In 1198, two kings hunting each other like wolves. But 6 years earlier, Richard himself had been the hunted one. A fugitive king, captured, ransomed, betrayed by his own brother. Before Philip nearly drowned at Gisors, he had nearly broken Richard's empire. And this war would decide which of them ruled France. October 1192. In the rapidly cooling waters of the eastern Mediterranean, Richard, King of England and ruler of the Angevin Empire, suddenly finds himself a fugitive, not a monarch. A 3-year truce with Saladin has been signed. Now, he must return home and defend what is his from those eager to tear it away. More bitter still, Richard hears that among those circling his throne is his own brother, John. When his ship reaches Corfu, Richard, undefeated since he first set out on crusade, faces a colder truth than the sea around him. His enemies are not only an ambitious younger brother, and Philip of France. Richard's proud march across Europe and voyage to the east has left a trail of resentment. Every road, every port, watched for the man they call the Lionheart. Nowhere is safe. He had refused to marry Philip's sister, Alice of France. Worse, whispers spread that he was somehow linked to the murder of Conrad of Montferrat, newly elected King of Jerusalem, a crown Richard had openly opposed. From Corfu, he travels in disguise, only 4 attendants. They claim to be returning Knights Templar. They sail north through the Adriatic, bound for the lands of his brother-in-law, Henry the Lion, Duke of Saxony and Bavaria, the last true friend Richard has on the continent. Winter seas shatter the ship along the coast of Istria. He tries to keep the disguise on land. After 3 days in the saddle, he is captured by the forces of Leopold of Austria. At Acre, Richard had hurled Leopold's banner from the walls into the mud. Now the Austrian has his revenge. Leopold holds him for months. Then, in March, Richard is handed over to the Holy Roman Emperor, Henry VI. While Richard passes the time writing verse, the empire he forged with steel faces, predators within and without. John wastes no time. The moment he hears of Richard's capture, he rides to Philip's court in France and swears fealty. In January, barely a month after Richard's imprisonment, John pledges loyalty to Philip in exchange for Richard's lands in Normandy and beyond. He even promises to marry Alice, the sister Richard cast aside. In England, Philip prepares to overrun Normandy, especially the mighty fortress of Gisors, near the Norman frontier. John tries to rally supporters, but their mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, working with Walter of Coutances, fortifies the island kingdom and fights for the king's release. Still, great castles like Nottingham and Tickhill fall into John's hands. To raise the staggering ransom demanded by the emperor, Eleanor imposes a crushing income tax, 25%. Englishmen cry out. No free people, they say, should bear such suffocating weight, especially on coin earned by sweat and labor. Across the Channel, Philip allies with Baldwin of Flanders. For a time, a French invasion of England feels frighteningly real. Raymond of Toulouse stirs trouble in Aquitaine, in the south of France. When campaign season begins, Philip moves on to Gisors. Claiming it had only been granted to Richard, as part of Alice's abandoned dowry. Gisors is no ordinary fortress. An octagonal wall, a towering cylindrical keep, a stone motte bristling with defenses. It overlooks the meeting of the Epte, Tronne, and Réveillon rivers, commanding the Vexin region. Philip advances as if preparing for a siege. Instead, its governor, Gilbert de Vasqueuil, surrenders with suspicious speed. Cries of treachery echo across Normandy. With Normandy's chief bulwark in his grasp, Philip pushes deep into the duchy, burning what cannot be used, seizing hostages by the dozens. The Vexin falls, Dieppe on the Channel coast, then south to Rouen, Richard's ancestral Norman capital. Robert de Beaumont, Earl of Leicester, veteran of the Crusade, resists fiercely, daring Philip to assault the city outright. Philip refuses the gamble. He lacks the strength for a long siege. A truce is patched together at Mantes in July. But secretly, both John and Philip attempt to bribe Emperor Henry to keep Richard imprisoned. The plot fails. Richard impresses the imperial nobles with his bearing and defense at trial. England bleeds itself dry to pay the ransom. In early 1194, he was free. "Look to yourself," Philip warns John. "The devil is loose." That devil lands at Sandwich, on the coast of Kent. England greets him in rapture. A month later, at Winchester Cathedral, Richard appears crowned and resplendent, a second coronation to erase the shame of captivity. Within weeks, Nottingham and Tickhill are torn from John's grip. Traitors are hanged. Richard shows no mercy for weakness. Before departing for Normandy, he appoints Hubert Walter, Archbishop of Canterbury, to govern in his absence. In May, he sails for Barfleur on the Norman coast, at the head of a fleet, said to number 300 ships. John throws himself at his brother's feet. Richard lifts him, embraces him. But the damage is immense. Gisors is gone. The Vexin lost. Western Normandy is slipping away. Arcas and Eu on the northern coast were nearly lost. Dieppe is barely recoverable. Castles in Touraine and Angoulême, deep in Aquitaine, surrendered. Richard moves fast. He relieves Verneuil. He drives Philip back. At Freteval Wood, near Vendôme in the Loire Valley, he strikes Philip's rearguard, seizing the royal baggage train. Horses, tents, siege engines, treasure, and the royal archives. War becomes information. Richard builds a new fortress, Château Gaillard, above the Seine at Les Andelys, overlooking the river road to Rouen. A stone defiance against Paris. By 1198, war erupts again. Philip drives into the Vexin, burning and looting. Richard counterattacks. He captures Courcelles-Chaussy and Bory, then returns to Dangu, just 4 miles from Gisors. Messengers reach Philip, likely near Gisors, falsely claiming Courcelles still holds. Philip rides out with several hundred knights. Richard, patrolling nearby, hears of his movement and moves at once. Philip arrives to find smoke rising. Courcelles is already lost. He turns to withdraw. Crossbow bolts fly from concealed positions along the tree line. Richard's riders appear. The French break. Richard charges. He unhorses 3 knights with a single lance, taking them prisoner. Miles of pursuit follow. Gisors rises ahead. The bridge over the River Epte becomes Philip's salvation. Knights surge across, and the bridge collapses. Steel and horses crash into the river. Philip is thrown into the water. Armor drags him down. 20 knights drowned beside him. At last, he is dragged ashore and rushed inside the walls of Gisors. French chroniclers downplay the humiliation. The numbers remain. 20 drowned. 100 nobles captured. 200 horses lost. In January 1199, the two kings met upon the Seine. Richard stands on a boat mid-river. Philip is at the bank. They hurl insults across the water, like old crusading rivals. Richard has reclaimed his lands. Only minor campaigns remain in the south, against Limoges and Angoulême. A small castle at Chalus, in the hills of Limousin, said to be held by just 40 men. Richard looks toward an easy spring, fortifying his empire, perhaps returning to the Holy Land. Everything, after all, is in God's hands. But history is rarely kind to men who think they have won. Philip survived that river. 20 knights did not. Richard believed he had reclaimed everything. Yet within months, a single crossbow bolt at Chalus would end the Lionheart. So here's the question. Was Richard the greater king, or simply the more ruthless one? Lion or fox? Tell me below. And if you want to see how a small castle with 40 men killed the most feared warrior in Europe, stay with me.